Yeah, so I think that outdoor stuff is all defense, you know what I mean? And it's like, you know, you can screw them all or whatever, or just kiss and nasty, and it's all those things that it's all
It was sometime in early March when the threat of COVID-19 became more than just talk and an all too real threat. Up until that point, we'd only heard of the odd case that wasn't all that close to home. And even with it being in America, we thought the government would get a handle on it before anything got out of control. But in all honesty, we couldn't focus on the virus here. There was so much more going on with the rest of us.
This, I think, is like, it's not somber or sober. It's just more like, this is what life is. Life is pain and suffering and also love. And life is moving forward and going on in spite of our losses. And in doing so, we honor those we have lost.
The musical Spring Awakening was in full swing, and we were all having far too much fun and putting in far too much work to really think about anything negative. But as time went on and COVID got closer to home, there was an obvious tension in the room. I still remember one of our final practices before spring break, talking about how something needed to be done quickly or life as we knew it was going to change. All of these negative emotions were almost eclipsed by us going on spring break. We all went our separate ways with the intent to have a great time on the much needed break. Unfortunately, these happy feelings didn't last long.
They were just like everybody else, wrapped up in themselves. In other words, they were human. So writes Albert Camus in his 1948 novel, The Plague, where the coastal city of Oran is ravaged unexpectedly by a prosaic pestilence. The people are, as we always are, taken by surprise. The realization of plague comes first to doctors, then is denied by public officials, ignored in the general public, and then finally, eventually, declared a public health emergency. The first thing that people talked about was how dumb the whole thing was. How the regulations and the quarantines were unfair. Unfair to all the businesses. Unfair to the vacationers and the travelers. Unfair to all their sports, their athletes and their fans. Unfair to those funerals, which had to be done hastily, ending no sooner than they began and being nothing more than an empty coffin grown into a sallow dirt hole, while elsewhere the body was dumped into a mass grave and then covered in quicklime for sanitation. The absurdity of such a change is hard to grasp. Every plan, every routine, every day had to be improvised, taken as it came. Camus reflects on this when, to his thinly veiled surrogate character, says, "I know it's an absurd situation, but we're all involved in it, and we've got to accept it as it is." On March 9th, 2020, the first cases of COVID-19 are confirmed in Ohio. the governor declares a state of emergency the same day.
At the beginning of the time on March 13th, I was sitting at my desk looking up cookie recipes for my birthday the following week. I had my phone sitting right next to me on the desk. The room filled with music that was playing loudly. There was a TV playing on the other side of the shared wall. Then my phone lit up and made a sound with an email from OSU saying that school was closed. The time that it all began, that time that we all had to stay in our homes, I was in my room when it all had happened. I just wanted to look up cookie recipes to share with my friends that next week. Time had felt like it stopped. So I said to myself that I should go tell my parents that I am not going back to school. When I was walking down the hallway to my living room, I was thinking about if I was ever going to see my friends again. Feeling caught in my throat, telling my parents that I am not going back. Their first question was, would I have to go online or will I get the grade I have now? I knew that they were scared to see what would happen. I knew I was scared too.
It was a few days before the lockdown in Ohio. March 21st it was. There's nothing particularly remarkable about this Saturday, at least in terms of the weather, but the climate had certainly shifted. COVID-19 in Cincinnati. Panic hits, and Governor Mike DeWine announces a shutdown to stop the spread early. This did little to make people feel safe, though. I remember distinctly that unremarkable Saturday afternoon being marked with absolute chaos. I had gone to Walmart like any other day to stock up on the essentials, food, drink, paper products, but instead I was greeted with empty shelves in just about every aisle, checkout lines clear to the back of the store, the sound of screaming children and panicked people everywhere. It was enough to drive any sane adult to mania. All of these factors were just compounding the stress enough that I could hear my heart pump in my ears. I was never going to get what I needed, nor was I going to get out in a timely manner. Here I was, stuck in the middle of the panicked Ohioan masses, in the middle of a pandemic that, prior to that day, I had only heard of as a distant fairy tale.
March 22nd, 2020. It was a chilly, rainy day as I walked into work. I did my best to avoid the puddles on the ground, and even though it was only noon, it seemed like the sun had already given up on brightening our day. The clouds were thick, low, and gray across the sky. It was one of those days that reminded you that winter wasn't quite over yet. The more it rained, the busier I got at work. I don't know if it was the weather, but we all had a bad feeling that day, and you could just feel the tension in the air. You could tell we all knew something was going to happen. We had to talk loudly to our customers to not only get over the sounds of their cars, but also the rain that was crashing down around us. My shoes were starting to get soaked, and I could hear them squeak across the concrete floor. As I walked back into our little building to get out of the rain, my coworker asked if we were going to watch the governor talk today. I looked up at the clock. It was nearly 2, so I pulled my phone out. As I was loading the news station to see the governor, my coworker was saying how he didn't think we'd really go into lockdown and that it was all blown out of proportion. Part of me wanted to believe he'd be right, but I knew it was coming. We both watched as the governor talked, and we both wanted him to go a little bit faster so we knew if our lives were once again going to be changed because of this pandemic. Sure enough, Governor DeWine and Dr. Amy Adkins announced the stay-at-home order. Before he was even finished saying what this meant for Ohio, we had a line out to the road. I've never sold near as much beer or cigarettes as I did that day. Very quickly, we went from having orders of about $20 to having people drop hundreds on the things they saw as necessities. The more we sold, the more aggressive and demanding our customers became. When it came time for me to leave, I wished the closers good luck with the rest of their night, and I went home. Later that night, I had to ask my boss for the next few weeks off as I'm considered at risk, and then my quarantine began. March 22nd, 2020 will probably be a hazy memory for me one day, but I'll never forget how COVID-19 changed everything I was used to.
We can never completely convey our anxieties to anyone else. Even our most profound means of expression becomes conventional over time, and our language is resigned to the commonplaces of plain narrative. The hours we spend putting feelings into words, driven by this passionate fire within ourselves, fueled by our own turmoil, all this means nothing. Jack shit to the people we talk to, who can only picture a conventional emotion, a grief that is traded on the marketplace, mass-produced. We can never completely understand anyone else's sufferings, but we know our own. And from that, we try our best to know others. All of this was amplified by the plague. Everyone was challenged to look beyond their own grief, even while they were separated from their loved ones, either by quarantine or death. They were challenged to see a bigger picture, to see that calamity is everyone's business. But, oddly enough, once everyone was in the grip of the disease, its very prevalence made things easier. Everyone, regardless of wealth or status, took precautions, made an effort, did their part, whatever that may be. It was simply a matter of common decency. To not take precautions, or to not make an effort, to not do what needed to be done would have been too absurd. No one could be that negligent. No. Everyone did their part. For on this earth, there are pestilences and there are victims. And as far as possible, one must refuse to be on the side of pestilence. About 3 months after the first confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Ohio, June 13th, there are 40,848 cases and 2,554 deaths total.
May, midday. A slight shadow can be seen moving across the room that is caused by a tree swaying in the breeze. The hard footsteps of children can be heard running around upstairs. Birds can be heard singing their songs in the trees outside of the window. But above all else, the sound of someone coming down the stairs can be heard. What does she want? Why can't she bother someone else in the house? Why does she always have to come down here and annoy me?
Hello? Is anyone alive in there?
Yes, I'm alive. Is there a reason you're pounding on my door?
I was just checking to see if you were up. I was worried you were sleeping your day away.
Well, I'm awake, and I have been for quite some while now. And what do you mean, sleeping my day away? You act like there's anything else for me to go and do.
You could always go outside. I mean, the fresh air would do you some good.
There is no reason for me to go outside. I can't go see any of my friends, and there is nowhere to go. Everywhere is closed.
Just because you can't go anywhere doesn't mean that you shouldn't go outside. Just go sit in the sun and read or something. It will make you feel better. Also, just call one of your friends on the phone or something. It's the next best thing to seeing them.
Or I could just play video games with them. I'm not gonna go anywhere. There's no point. So I think I'm just gonna stay in my room.
Suit yourself. If you change your mind, you are always welcome upstairs.
I hate to admit it, but she might be right. Some fresh air would do me some good.
The last week we were on campus before quarantine, a small group of my friends and I had lunch together one day during that week. While at lunch, my friend Sarah informed us all that she would be leaving campus for good.
I've come to the decision that after this semester, I'll be leaving.
Are you going to main campus like I am?
Are you graduating early?
No, I'm dropping out. I have some serious family stuff happening.
What kind of family stuff?
My dad,
What?
he's very sick.
COVID?
No, he tore his esophagus while eating dinner. He is currently in the ICU.
I'm sorry to hear about that, but are you at least going to see them over the break?
Yes, I am. They need me to help around the house, and my siblings need me at this time.
So, are you at least staying until the end of the semester?
Yeah, my family doesn't want me to leave school until the semester is ended.
Will you keep in touch with us? Will you come back to school at all?
At least until the current things have gotten better. I know when classes are all done, I will be too busy to keep up with you all, but I'll try. If not, I'm sorry, but you have all been good friends.
During these times, I have found keeping in touch with my friends has been hard and sometimes impossible with everyone's different schedules. But just because something is hard doesn't mean it isn't worth doing.
My social life during the lockdown was basically non-existent. A week in, I lost my best friend to my formerly best friend of an ex-girlfriend. Every other relationship in my life just seemed to be on its last strings, and COVID was just the scissors to cut it off. However, I met the sweetest girl just before our lockdown started, and we had since started dating, and we had become the best of friends. So while some were lost, I gained so much more in Allie. Making plans while under lockdown was probably the biggest struggle. The order to stay at home unless you're an essential employee or needed to get essential goods made leisure hangouts difficult, as she lives a fair distance from me. Also, everything is closed or closing earlier, and it was just the cherry on top of making date plans an impossible task. As restrictions are being lifted, though, we have been more than making up for lost time. The landscape of social interactions and dating in general has definitely changed, and we're learning and tempering our expectations every step of the way.
To be honest, the pre-COVID was probably less interesting than during COVID. Pre-COVID, my friends who were still in high school were off making high school memories with each other. The friends I had graduated with were starting the next stages of their lives, while I mostly stuck to myself when college started. As sad as that might sound, I think it was good for me to have that time. While college is where you can make lifelong friends, I have instead been able to focus on my long-term goals. Surprisingly, my social life grew after COVID began shutting things down. I and my now boyfriend Brandon went on our first date during COVID. We went to Five Guys and we had to eat in the car. I was okay with it because I knew it wasn't going to be the only date. Very quickly, he became one of the most important people in my life. He was always there for me when I felt alone during quarantine. It made me forget the destruction COVID had caused to everyone's lives. I couldn't have asked for a better time to meet him. I'm glad I've got to experience this interesting time with someone by my side who is dealing with the same things I am.
The scale of some things are so beyond us that they're reduced to numbers, a list of dates and graphs, data of some bygone time, statistics that were once bodies. And just as senseless as plague comes, it goes. Sudden but gradual, methodical in a senseless sort of way. But plague doesn't end, it leaves. Plague goes dormant for years, decades, or centuries before taking another random generation by surprise. And when it does, we refuse to believe it, deny it, think ourselves above something so primitive. Plague will, to us, always feel unprecedented and unlike anything humanity has ever seen before, simply because it is unlike anything we've ever seen in our lives. Nothing is predestined, but some things can't be helped. Plague is one of those many things. It's something like war, something that always takes us by surprise, even with the most obnoxious warning signs. It's something that always forefronts in our minds our own mortality, not just the chance of death, but the certainty of it. If not now, then later. Six months after the first cases of coronavirus in Ohio, there are 171,626 cases and 5,017 deaths total. Ohio began setting record highs for the daily number of new cases, but the daily death rate is steady.
In the beginning, with a bit of sadness and difficulty, everyone has gone through a lot. Times are hard for some families, with schools closing and businesses shutting down. With the way things are going, it could be bad, but no one will ever know until it happens. If things get worse, we could be stuck at home again with no way of seeing or physically touching people. During this time, we must wear a mask to protect others and ourselves. But we are finding ways to survive in this hard time. I am happy that I am going back to school to see people in person and not through a computer screen. For 2020, this happens to be our current norm. With our current technology, we have more ways to keep in touch with other people. We can find more ways to stay safe and find a cure, and I hope we can get back to the way it was before. We have a way of turning things around for being mankind, and it's hard to keep us down and out for very long.
COVID has been eye-opening to many of us how things really are across the world. The current failings of our establishments, poor responses by our governments, willful ignorance of the people making control just that much harder. We aren't in the clear yet, even if things seem like they get better for a week or two. We all need to do what's right to protect ourselves and the people around us. I think one thing is certain is that this is going to be our new normal for a while if we don't start taking safety precautions seriously. Last year, amongst my peers, we could have never seen us living in conditions like this. I think this year has highlighted just how weak the rug beneath our feet really was. 2020 is that wake-up call that we need to look at our systems for deep change. This reevaluation could lead us to be stronger than ever. But we just have to take it seriously. The alternative is much more dark.
COVID has been a negative experience for just about everybody involved. It came so quickly and changed life faster than we could blink. It changed life from our academic lives of schooling to our social lives of hanging out with friends and being with family. It is so easy to get stuck on the negatives and think that we will never get out of this tough time that we are in. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. While there have been so many negatives, I feel like there are brighter times ahead. Every day you see more signs of a brighter future. More people are wearing masks, and more people are beginning to social distance and take COVID serious. These are extremely inspiring signs, and it really gives me hope that we will be able to get past all of these troubling times in the relatively near future.
It is important to remember that we're all experiencing this historic event together. While we all have our own individual and unique experiences when it comes to COVID-19, we all have the common goal of keeping others safe and getting through this pandemic. Please remember that you are not alone. It's okay to be sad, scared, confused, and generally just not okay. We are all in this together, and please reach out for help if you need it. We were all stopped dead in our tracks when businesses began to close and stores became empty shells of what they used to be. Before we even had time to process what was about to happen to our normal lives, we were introduced to a completely different way of life. Things have since opened, and our lives are slowly getting back to normal, but not without a few changes. If you're anything like me, you get halfway through the parking lot of a store and have to turn around and go all the way back to your car because you forgot your mask. As annoying as that is, it's important that we all do our part to keep at-risk individuals safe. I myself am considered at risk and took time off work at the beginning of quarantine just to be safe. I was excited and honestly anxious when I returned back to work. I didn't want to get sick, and more importantly, I didn't want to get the people I care about sick. I felt very similar in my feelings about going back to school. I love going to OSU, and it was the perfect choice for me, so I couldn't wait to be back in the familiar setting and finally have a normal routine. Distance and hybrid learning can be difficult to get used to, but I felt it helped me gain problem-solving skills I otherwise wouldn't have learned. I am happy with where I am in my life. I have a happy relationship, a great job with amazing people, and I go to a school that cares about its students. The biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is that life is unpredictable. We can't always control what happens, but we can control how we react and overcome the challenges we face. It isn't always easy, but together we can get through this and anything else life throws our way.
Nah, I still think we should end with Logan's part instead of Allie's.
What, my part isn't good enough?
Well, it's not better than his.
His ending is way too pessimistic. Nobody wants or needs any more of that right now.
Hey, nobody needs any more blind optimism right now either. And the community thing isn't even sad, it's just truthful.
Okay, first off, COVID-19 is not a plague. It's a virus. And secondly, diminishes human agency.
And a happy ending exaggerates human agency.
So what, don't you even want to try to take precaution? Don't you even want to try to stay safe?
That's not what Camus' ending says at all. He does advise to take safety precautions. You just shouldn't be sad if you end up dying anyway.
This is pointless. We are never going to decide this between the four of us.
Michaela,
What?
don't you think that the play should end on an optimistic note rather than a sad one?
I mean, I personally feel like everyone needs optimism right now.
Ha, 3 against 2, majority rule.
Democracy is a scam.
Michaela!
Stop yelling.
Look, don't you agree that our play has a civic responsibility to be honest with its audience?
Well, of course, it's better to tell the truth.
Huh, see? She agrees with Camus.
No, wait.
Don't force her to agree with you.
Don't accuse us of using force.
What if we end with my part?
No!
Look, we have to end with Logan's. I will die on this hill.
Glad Brandon's here, so I don't have to be the asshole like you guys and argue for my ending over somebody else's.
I am fine being an asshole, and that is why we are ending with mine.
Like hell we are!
What's wrong with my part?
Oh my gosh, just do rock, paper, scissors or something!
We cannot decide who's going to be the end by playing some random game.
Yeah, the ending of any story sends a
moral message about the story's conflict, and it implies how this conflict and conflicts like it in the future can be overcome.
or if they can be overcome at all. And the ending of anything shows how the characters have changed.
Or how the characters could change.
And the tone of an ending can change the entire tone of a story.
The tone of the story is so important. It is the first thing that the audience will take with them back into the real world.
Well, do you have any other ideas how to figure this out?
Fine. Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot!
Fuck.